it okay? How will he do it here? You didn't ask me any.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I'll do it. Yes. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for taking a little longer to come back to you and execute what we had promised to do. I think you know my name. I'm Edward Kisiangani, the Principal Secretary in the State Department of Broadcasting and Telecommunication. And I would like to invite the CS in the ministry to make some observations about what is happening in our country, and what he is going to talk about represents the government statement. As you are aware, it is in this State Department that the Office of the Government Spokesperson sits. So it is under his ministry that we have the government spokesperson. So without wasting time, CS Owalo, I invite you to speak to these gentlemen and the ladies of the Fourth Estate on things that affect our country. And at the end of the day, after the CS has spoken, we shall invite a few questions. If you need any clarification, we shall do the clarification. Thank you very much. So I have this distinguished honor and a high privilege to welcome our CS, Owalo.
So I have this. Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the Fourth Estate. First of all, we want to welcome you to the ministry. As the PS has already espoused, the Office of the Government Spokesperson is domiciled in this ministry. And depending on unfolding events from time to time, of course, you'll be expecting us to give you briefs as to what the government position is on certain emerging issues in our operational environment. First of all, I want to start by thanking God for giving us the long-awaited rains. As you are aware, we have been experiencing unfriendly weather, and that has culminated into drought, affecting a substantial proportions of the Kenyan economy, or most parts of Kenya for that matter. It is our view or hope that these long rains, which have finally come, will go a long way in helping farmers to pursue the long rainy season, planting season and harvest that will eventually bridge the gap that we are witnessing today as far as food is concerned. We believe that if we position ourselves effectively from an agriculture perspective while capitalizing on the current rains, we should be able to bridge the food deficit, and it will go a long way in ensuring that our country becomes sustainable as far as food production is concerned. Of course, you are also aware that the government in its own wisdom has been making certain conscious and deliberate actions to alleviate the food shortage. Within the first week of being in government, you are aware that the government reduced the cost of fertilizer from the hitherto about 7,000 shillings to a meager 3,500 shillings per 50 kilogram bag of fertilizer. As we speak, there's an elaborate program of farm inputs that is being distributed to listed farmers all over the country as a means of ensuring that we enhance the level of our food supply. Let me also mention, ladies and gentlemen, that the cost of any commodity, food inclusive, is a function of the cost of inputs. And globally, Kenya being not an exception, is influenced or informed by the forces of supply and demand. In a situation like ours, where the demand is either constant or escalating, the only measure, sustainable measure that the government can undertake to reduce the cost of food is to enhance the supply. And this is why the government has been making deliberate efforts by making sure that we have got fertilizer available to farmers and also seed available to farmers. These are basic but highly fundamental economic principles that influence prices in the market globally, and Kenya as a country is not an exception, ladies and gentlemen. In the same vein, with the long rains, we have also witnessed a bit of flooding, and the government, again, is taking appropriate action to mitigate the effects of flooding, which has affected several parts of the country. Having said that, I want to go to the next issue, which is about skirmishes and acts of violence that we have witnessed in several parts of the country in the recent past. From the onset, may I state clearly that in the view of government, the current demonstrations that we have been witnessing is not informed by the concern about the cost of living, but it is largely influenced by the fact that a section of the political class, to date, despite having exhausted all the legal mechanisms through which election disputes can be alleviated, still are not convinced that they are out of government. And the cost of living and the demonstrations emanating therefrom is a disguise as opposed to the reason for the current demonstrations that we are witnessing. While we accept and recognize the fact that our Article 37 of the Kenyan Constitution, our 2010 constitutional dispensation, allows for demonstrations and picketing, the position of government is that such demonstrations and picketing must be exercised or undertaken within the confines of the law. And those confines of the law, or the ambit of the law, is clear that picketing and demonstrations should not lead to destruction of people's property. It should be done in a peaceful manner. In the same vein, let me also state that the right to property and life is a fundamental and a cardinal principle of the law that the government remains alive to and will go out of its way to protect. Irrespective of whose property it is, the government will protect the property of each and every Kenyan. If the property of an itinerary trader operating downtown on River Road is destroyed, it is as painful as would be the case when the property of the high and mighty is destroyed. What I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, is that the rule of law clearly articulates that each and every Kenyan is equal before the law. Each and every Kenyan is equal before the law. And the government will protect the property and lives of each and every Kenyan indiscriminately. Considering the riots that we witnessed last week on Monday, and informed by the fact that the opposition again, through its leadership, Mr. Raila Odinga, called for subsequent demonstrations this week, Monday, the government went out of its way to put in place an elaborate mitigation framework to ensure that a repeat of destruction of property is not witnessed within the CBD. Adequate security was deployed by government within the central business district, and with the efforts of the demonstrators, led by the political class, under the tutelage and stewardship of Raila Odinga having been thwarted and failing to gain access into the CBD, they went into the environs of the city. And under the guise of exercising their democratic rights, whipped up sentiments which led to destruction of property, including but not limited to the burning of a police vehicle, GKB 856D, a Toyota Corolla belonging to the Kenyan police. Such acts of violence, especially when being meted on government property or the property of anybody else for that matter, cannot be entertained. And the government will not entertain that moving forward. We are aware that against the background of the government having deployed heavy security within the CBD, certain hooligans also invaded private property elsewhere, took advantage of that. Such acts are regrettable, just as the acts we have witnessed downtown on River Road, directed at small business enterprises. And the government has put in place or launched investigations to ascertain who could have been behind the invasion of such property, while at the same time also undertaking comprehensive investigations to determine who could have been behind the invasion and destruction of property belonging to common traders within the environs of the city. Let me state, ladies and gentlemen, without fear of contradiction, that in this country, over the past 3 decades, we have witnessed a systematic pattern where people who are dissatisfied with the results of elections resort to acts of violence as a way and means of intimidating the duly elected government into submission. The Kenya Kwanza government, under the tutelage of His Excellency President William Samoei Ruto, respects the rule of law, respects the Constitution, and will uphold it to the letter. For avoidance of doubt and for purposes of clarity, under no circumstances will the current government be cowed into submission through acts of violence and intimidation which are outside the confines and ambit of the law. If it has happened before that through acts of violence and intimidation we have ended up with Nusumkati governments, if I may use that phrase, it does not mean that it will happen with the current government or any other government for that matter in the foreseeable future. If anything, it should not. We must accept to operate within the confines of the law, where we go for elections every 5 years. The winner assumes office, the loser accepts the results and congratulates the winner, and all Kenyans put the elections behind and move forward as one united country. That is what we would wish to see. And by extension, we want to thank Kenyans for peacefully going back to their daily undertakings subsequent to the 2022 elections. It was a sign of maturity. It was a sign that our country has finally become of age and our democracy has matured, that we can go to elections today and tomorrow we are back to our daily undertakings, despite the fact that there was a winner and a loser in the elections. That is what the law stipulates, And that is what our 2010 constitutional dispensation advised, and that is what we appeal to Kenyans to continue upholding. We also want to appeal once more to Kenyans to continue with what they have exhibited in the recent past of ignoring unnecessary calls by politicians to resort to acts of violence or to stop them from going for their daily-to-daily activities. The government has put in place elaborate mechanism to ensure that the lives and property of Kenyans will be protected, that those Kenyans who want to go to work and undertake their daily course continue doing so without intimidation from any quarter, the political class inclusive. We are aware that a section of the political class in the opposition, led by Raila Odinga, has again called for another set of demonstrations on Thursday. Let us take this opportunity to assure Kenyans that the government will put in place adequate security measures to ensure that all Kenyans are able to undertake their daily course without intimidation from any quarter. Go ahead with your businesses as usual. The government is firmly in a position to create an enabling environment to ensure that you will not be intimidated by anybody from any quarter whatsoever. Let me also espouse one thing, that the only means of forming government is through our electoral process. And that process is very, very clear. And it is well defined in the minds of Kenyans. You will not use an orthodox means of getting into government, either fully or partially through an orthodox means. It is not a walk in the park. You have to seek the mandate of Kenyans to become part of government or to form government. So it's not just a question of telling Kenyans that let's converge and march to State House. It will not happen because it is against the law. And if you think that that is the approach that you are going to use to intimidate William Ruto into submission, then please get it from government that you will wait for a long, long time. You will wait for a long, long time. It will not happen. We have one government in place under William Ruto for the next 5 years up to 2027. Anybody who is not happy with the outcome of those elections, having exhausted the legally acceptable mechanisms of addressing electoral grievances, can wait for 2027. As Kenya Kwanza government, we are not going to engage in politics between now and 2027. If we are to engage in any politics, it will be politics of the economy, because we are concerned about the fundamental challenges facing the common mwananchi. We are not going to engage in any politics between now and 2027. And we are appealing to all segments of the political class to take cue and follow suit. Those are my brief comments on behalf of government this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and perhaps we can now welcome questions.
CS, let me delegate some responsibility
Yes.
to Barack Obluka.
Yes.
Maybe I'll assist you to answer questions if it's necessary. That you can regulate, we pick a few questions, we answer, then we go. So I delegate that responsibility to you.
Thank you. Yes.
For those who are not aware, Barack is an advisor, a communications advisor in the office of the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Information, Communications, and the Digital Economy. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Waziri. Colleagues, I'm aware that some of you will have many questions, but let us try to avoid multiple barriers. If you have 3 questions, think about the most important question you want to ask, and ask that one question so that we can give other people the opportunity as well. So you tell us your name, the media house, and then you put your question. Keep it brief. I saw this hand first.
My name is Millard from the Captain.
Yes.
I don't know from you. What is the take of the ministry and the attack committed with journalists coverage of protests? The joint investigator as well as Monday last week.
We have stated from the very onset, and many a time in the recent past, that we expect freedom of the media, as is enshrined in the Constitution. We do not support attacks on the media. We expect that the media will undertake its roles and responsibilities informed by their mandate, impartially, but also within the confines of the Media Code of Conduct and relevant laws, regulations, and constitutional provisions. We expect the media to be self-regulatory. That has been our position yesterday, today, and it will be our position tomorrow, that the media should self-regulate itself. It is not for government to come in to regulate the media or to coerce the media or to stifle the media, if I may use those words. But we also expect responsible journalism from the media. We want to see a situation where the media conducts itself maturely. Let us not use inflammatory language that can create the perception that the country is perhaps on the precipice of chaos or about to go into war. We can say the same thing differently by using moderate language. You know, if I may give the economy as a hypothetical example, if the economy goes south, it affects the media as it affects any other critical stakeholder segment of the Kenyan society. So let us not, within the ambit of undertaking our journalism, use language which scares investors or causes unnecessary insecurity in the country. Let us exercise a modicum of honor, some moderate language in the exercise of our constitutional mandate as a media. But you will continue enjoying your freedom of associations, freedom to hold opinion, and of course freedom to disseminate information as is enshrined in the Constitution and other legal provisions.
Thank you so much. My name is Mindin Bogo from Bogota.
Yes.
And my question is in regard to your ministry.
Yes.
The Chief Administrative Secretary, ICT, Dennis Itumbi,
Yes.
has moved to the court to try and see how best they can be able to resume work. And I wanted to hear the very clear position of the government. As far as this whole CAS thing is concerned, because some of them have reported to us today, immigration, CAS, or Millicent Omanga was in office, and we can't really be able to tell where does this one stand when it comes to the rule of law that you people, rather the government, is pushing. And maybe the last one is in regard to Kibra, and this has to do with the freedom of worship. Today, a church is banned, a mosque is partially banned. What is the position of the government, and what would you tell the people of Kibra today? What would you tell the worshippers that worship in those spaces, remembering that Ramadan is here, those people might not be able to access the mosque at all?
Okay. The position of the government is that the government respects the rule of law. And our recent history is awash with examples where the government has gone out of its way, not just to conform to judicial rulings, but also conform to the dictates of the Constitution. That is the position of government. As and when the court pronounces itself on any matter, the government will abide to it.
Sorry, Waziri, but don't you think it's a give and take, because some of you are saying that you're following the rule of law, but yet other people are reporting to office? Yesterday, the deputy president had cases in his office.
Yes.
the cabinet secretary.
It is actually subject to how you want to interpret the law. You are aware that these cars were actually appointed when there was no injunction in place to the contrary. So it's a question of how we juggle around the law moving forward. But the position of government, from one side, one may argue that the cars have got the right to report to office. Somebody else may argue that they cannot report to office depending on the cost of ruling. One may argue that this recent court ruling came after the cars had already been legally appointed. But we leave that to those who are acting within that space of our judicial framework to execute that issue to a logical conclusion. It's subject to how you interpret it here.
Thank you so much. My name is Mawasiliano. I write for the county. I have just one thing from you, sir.
Yes.
From the speech you said that right now the Kenya federal government is looking at the economic political influence. As we speak right now, there's demonstration all over, the economy is going down, many businesses are losing their business to trade out, and we are losing billions of money every day. What is the take of the government? Are you going to have moderation, to have a dialogue between the opposition and the government, or you're just speaking to continue the way you're continuing?
The government has always stated that it is willing to dialogue with any integral segment of the Kenyan society on issues to do with the economy. But we are not going to open a window for political dialogue because there is no provision within the law that we can exploit to get into political dialogue. I stated in my brief remarks here that in our view as government, the current demonstrations we are witnessing are not as a result of the cost of living. The cost of living, high cost of living is not unique to Kenya. It's a global issue informed by global factors. And we are not going to enter into political negotiations with any segment of the Kenyan society under the guise of demonstrations or instigated through the guise of demonstrations against, purportedly, because of the cost of living. That we will not do.
Okay, I think we are repeating the same question.
Yeah.
And I will allow only 3 questions. And we really must come up with something.
But let me just also explain something. If any Kenyan comes up with a viable proposition to address economic issues, the government is ready and willing to engage it. Because the window is open, legally and otherwise, for government to do that. But we will not engage into negotiations or dialogues that are anchored on political discourse. We do not have a window within our constitutional dispensation to engage in that, and we don't want to act ultra-vires to the Constitution.
Thank you very much. My name is Kelvin. I'm from the Business Daily newspaper.
Yes.
My question is not related to the topic of today's presser, but it's related to a topic that directly touches on the ministry.
Yes.
And it is concerning the government's plan to manufacture locally made.
Why don't we address that under a different forum so that we focus on the theme of this meeting, if you don't mind? My office is open. You can always reach me here. Yeah. Yes.
AU has called for dialogue, and they feel that this is a solution to what is happening in the country. And we have adliners from both political divides. Where does this leave the economy? Where does this leave also the Kenyans which we are fighting for?
That is the concern of government, that we should not be engaging in politics at this point in time to the detriment of the economy. It does not matter which side of the political divide is engaging in the politics. As a government, the official position of government is that we are focusing on revitalizing the economy. Which economy we got on its deathbed when the Kenya Kwanza government came into office. We got the coffers dry, and we have done fundamentally well so far in trying to stabilize the economy. And we believe that in the not too distant future, this economy, based on the policy framework we have put in place, the economic policy framework and the interventions we are introducing in the market, we will be able to get back this economy on track so that we collect adequate revenue to pay off our debt, and we also have surplus to finance both our recurrent and development expenditure. That will happen, and I can state that without fear of contradiction.
Perhaps let me just enrich something what the CS is saying. Ladies and gentlemen, I see you talking about dialogue. What do you want us to dialogue about? Elections? You want us to dialogue about the ruling of the Supreme Court? Or what are we dialoguing about? When this country was messed up for 4 years, under the guise of handshake and the BBI, where people were keeping money in their cabinets, did you ask questions? When things go wrong for 4 years and people come in for 3 months and you say, let us dialogue. The dialogue we had was the people. The government had a dialogue with the people. The current leaders had a dialogue with the people. The opposition had a dialogue with the people, but the people chose this government led by the president. So what we just need is, if there are proposals, as the CS is saying, which can improve the economy, we can do that. But proposals to improve the economy include enhancing food production so that you bring down the cost of living. If you are going to encourage and cover people who create what you call, they burn tires on the roads and create potholes in Kisumu, it is the taxpayer who will repair those potholes. Does that bring down the cost of living when you are destroying infrastructure that has been built by taxpayers' money? So let us negotiate about how best we can improve the economy, and bring down the cost of living means going to the farm, enhancing production, not demonstrating, burning places of worship, and then destroying vehicles bought by taxpayers to look after the police welfare. That is not the kind of negotiation that the government will get involved in. I think that's what the CS is talking about. So tell me what you want us to negotiate about.
Okay, I think we have done Waziri. That should be sufficient. Police, we have another assignment. We will have to bring the curtain down. Thank you very much, comrades of the press. Thank you.
Thank you, and see you again.
I love the way we did different ones when it comes to government.
Hapa kuna maneno kwa zote na nini
Tufanye niko na kibumbi.
na maana
Kama moja ni yako.
basi mkae tupige cards. Eh. Kuna uchungu na mimi sawa. Mmoja mtamlimisha.
Basi mmoja unafanya nini? Tutakumiza.
Yes sir. Nini Azimio TV? Ati nini? Azimio TV. Hapana, sisi si watu wa Azimio TV. We need truth.
Lakini mbona mna uchungu hivyo?
Wako na machungu.
Wana dress ni kama hata kutupiga.
Kama wangu Raila.
Kuna vitu